Welcome back to Sleepy Gamer Stories. Tonight, we'll drift gently into the painted world of Clair Obscur, Expedition 33, a story of sorrow, creation, and quiet healing. Settle in, relax your breath, and let the world fade softly around you. Whenever you're ready, let's begin. The world of Clair Obscur rests under a quiet sky, painted in pale hues of blues and grays, as if the heavens themselves are waiting for something to break the stillness. On the drifting island of Lumiere, life continues in gentle motions. Footsteps on cobblestone, the breeze brushing over rooftops, the distant hum of ocean waters tapping softly against the shore. Yet beneath all of this lies a tension so familiar that no one questions it anymore. It is the tension of a world living under a yearly ritual called the Gommage, the erasing. Far beyond the island, across waves that shimmer like spilled ink, stands the mainland. There, carved against the horizon like a monument built from old stone and sorrow, rises the monolith. Its surface is smooth, untouched by time, waiting for the moment each year when a divine figure appears above it, known simply as the Paintress. No one on Lumiere has ever stood before her, yet everyone knows her silhouette. Tall, graceful, almost weightless, like a vision suspended between dream and reality. When she lifts her brush, the entire world holds its breath. For nearly 70 years, she has painted a single number onto the monolith. That number becomes fate. Anyone who has reached that age simply vanishes, quietly, instantly, and without a trace, as though their presence on the world's canvas has been gently rubbed away. No screams, no chaos, just absence. And so, each year, humanity prepares itself, bracing for the next piece of its population to dissolve like dust on wind. The numbers always go down. Slowly at first, then more rapidly. Like a quiet countdown carved into history. By the time our story begins, the fear on Lumiere is deep and heavy. People look at their birthdays the way sailors look at approaching storms. They count the years not by candles or celebrations, but with a kind of trembling uncertainty. Everyone knows what number is coming next. 33. Gustave, a 32-year-old engineer with a mechanical arm of his own design, carries that knowledge like a stone in his chest. He has lived a thoughtful, quiet life, working with gears and tools, keeping his hands busy so his mind does not wander too far into the future. But as the day of the Gommage approaches, the future presses in around him. When he closes his eyes, he sees another face, Sophie. Calm, warm, self-assured Sophie. A woman he once loved, and in some quiet way still does. She is 33. On the morning the Gommage arrives, the island feels unusually still. Even the sea seems to soften its rhythm. Families gather together. Friends exchange quiet glances of understanding. No one speaks about what is coming, but the truth sits in every breath. Gustave finds Sophie. She smiles when she sees him, but the sadness behind her eyes is unmistakable. They don't embrace like lovers or argue like people desperate for more time. They simply share a moment, a fragile space where two souls acknowledge what they cannot stop. Across the water, a faint glow appears near the monolith. The Paintress has arrived. Her movement is serene. Her brush lifts. The world tightens. And then, with a stroke of shimmering color, she paints the number. 33. In an instant, Sophie disappears. One heartbeat she is standing in front of him, warm and real, her presence filling the air like a familiar melody. The next, she is gone. No light, no sound, No trace of her shape on the ground or in the wind. Just the quiet that follows when a page is turned too suddenly. The Gommage ends as silently as it began. Around the world, chairs sit empty, beds untouched, rooms missing the laughter or arguments they held just moments before. Lumiere is left with fewer footsteps on its streets, fewer voices to break the evening air. Gustave stands alone, the imprint of Sophie's absence seared into him. He has 1 year left before the next number is painted. 1 year before his own age meets the same quiet fate. But beneath his grief, something shifts. Subtle at first, like a gear loosening in a long, still machine. The weight of loss becomes something sharper, something that points him forward rather than trapping him in place. Gustave steps aboard and watches the shoreline slowly drift away as the ship sails forward. The island becomes a silhouette, then a smear of darkness, then a memory beneath the painted night sky. Ahead lies the mainland, its ruined landscapes, its lingering creatures of color and form, its mysteries tied to the Paintress's hidden sorrow. Behind lies everything Gustave once knew. And with the soft rocking of the waves against the hull, the journey of Expedition 33 quietly begins. The ship sails through the night with a gentle rhythm, its wooden hull whispering softly against the dark waters. Lanterns sway in the breeze like drifting stars, casting warm halos across the deck where the members of Expedition 33 rest in scattered quiet. Gustave stands near the railing, the sea air brushing his face, carrying with it the faint scent of distant rain. His mind drifts in and out of memories, some tender, some heavy, and always, somewhere near the center of them, dawn begins as a pale wash of silver light spreading slowly across the horizon. As the fog lifts in soft rolling waves, the coastline of the mainland emerges like an unfinished painting touched by age and sorrow. Jagged cliffs rise from the sea, streaked with faint color, as though they were brushed with layers of pigment long ago and gently worn down by time. The land feels ancient, abandoned, waiting. Maelle appears beside Gustave, drawing her cloak closer around her as she watches the mainland come into view. Despite her youth, her eyes hold a depth shaped by years of watching people vanish with each gommage. She doesn't speak, but her presence at his side is steady. They are family, stitched together through loss, through resilience, through the quiet understanding of people who have survived the same kind of grief. As the ship draws close to shore, the group prepares themselves. Sciel checks the edges of his weapons, humming softly under his breath, a habit that seems to soothe everyone nearby. Lune secures her satchel of scrolls and arcane tools, her quill glowing faintly at her fingertips. The crew lowers a ramp to the narrow beach, and the expedition steps onto the mainland for the first time. The air here is different, heavier, filled with echoes. Along the rocks, strange formations cling like hardened drips of paint, frozen in mid-flow. Swirls of dried pigment stain the shallow pools of water, shifting colors as the wind passes over them. It is clear that the Paintress's influence lingers everywhere, long after the Gommage ends each year. Gustave kneels to touch one of the hardened shapes. It flakes beneath his fingers like brittle glass, revealing layers of color beneath. Blue, violet, then deep crimson. The land remembers every stroke she has painted. They move inland, following a narrow path lined with broken stone pillars. Clusters of wildflowers sway in muted shades, their petals tinged with odd colors, as if painted by an unsteady hand. The further they walk, the quieter the mainland becomes. Not even birds interrupt the stillness. It feels as though the world is holding a breath it never released. Before long, a low tremor ripples through the ground. Gustave lifts his head. The shallow pools nearby begin to swirl. At first, it looks like water being stirred. Then the colors inside the pools rise, twisting upward in liquid ribbons. The swirling mass takes shape slowly, limbs stretching, features forming, colors shifting like strokes on a canvas. A creature stands before them, its body shimmering with hues that ripple and blend in impossible ways. It is one of the Paintress's creations, born of her will, left behind to guard her realm. The creature moves with fluid grace, gliding forward without a sound. Sciel steps into position, blades drawn. Maelle steadies her grip on her weapon. Lune whispers a soft chant, lines of energy flowing around her like faint strokes of light. The creature lunges. What follows is a quiet but fierce struggle. Gustave's mechanical arm releases controlled bursts of force, each impact splintering the creature's painted form. Sciel moves like a dancer, blades slicing through streaks of color. Maelle's precision strikes complement his movements, and Lune's sigils weave protective patterns around them. With a final shudder, the creature collapses inward, dissolving into drifting clouds of pigment that scatter across the stones like dust caught in sunlight. The world grows still again. Only the faint glow of the creature's remnants lingers before fading completely. The group exchanges steady breaths. They are safe, for now. But the mainland is clearly far from empty. The expedition follows a winding path toward a tall structure silhouetted against the rising sun. An old watchtower. Its walls are cracked but still upright, its presence looming above the silent fields like a sentinel that has waited far too long. As they approach, the air around the tower feels different, charged with a subtle echo, as though the stones themselves remember voices from long ago. It is here, at the base of the watchtower, that the next step of their journey begins, and where the mainland starts to reveal the first of its hidden truths. The watchtower rises quietly into the morning air, its stone surface worn smooth by years of wind and weather. Moss clings to the cracks like faded strokes of emerald paint. The structure feels old in a way that goes beyond time, old in the way forgotten memories feel old, lingering yet distant, waiting to be uncovered. As Expedition 33 steps toward the entrance, the world around them seems to hush, as though the land is listening. The tower's doorway yawns open into darkness. Gustave runs his hand along the frame, feeling the cold stone beneath his fingertips. Maelle lights a lantern, its soft glow spilling across the uneven floor inside. Dust drifts lazily through the air, catching the light like tiny flecks of gold. Lune, always attuned to the faintest traces of magic, tilts her head slightly, as if hearing something the others cannot. "This place remembers things," she whispers. They move slowly through the lower chamber. Shelves line the walls, empty in some places, overflowing in others with brittle scrolls and shattered inkpots. Papers lie scattered across the floor, though many pages have been erased, blank sheets where writing once lived, as if touched by the same force that steals people from the world. Maelle kneels beside one of the pages, brushing her thumb across its smooth surface. The paper is intact, but whatever was written there has vanished completely. It is a quiet reminder that the Gommage affects more than just lives. It touches memories, knowledge, the very traces of existence. Gustave studies the room, searching for anything that survived. Sciel, ever alert, raises his lantern higher to inspect the stairway spiraling upward along the tower's inner wall. The stones of the steps glimmer faintly. Thin streaks of color shimmer across them, trailing upward like remnants of a recent presence. Something was here. Something not long ago. The group ascends carefully. Each step echoes softly, the sound climbing the tower ahead of them. The air grows cooler as they rise, carrying with it a faint metallic scent. Lune pauses now and then to touch the wall, feeling for patterns of energy that linger like whispers in the stone. On the second floor, they find what remains of an ancient study. Several tables stand in disarray, toppled as though abandoned in haste. Books lie open, some covered in a thin film of dust, others untouched but blank, erased clean. Sciel sifts through a pile of notes, but only fragments of sentences survive. Lune spreads them across a table, piecing together scraps. Numbers, sketches of the monolith, and annotations that hint at attempts to understand the Paintress's power. The scholars who once studied here were searching for patterns. Why the numbers fell, why the ages shifted, and whether the Paintress acted on emotion, reason, or something neither human nor divine. Their work ended abruptly, the pages fading over time like memories losing shape. The expedition climbs to the next level. The stairs narrow, shadows folding around them. The air feels heavier, and the faint glow on the steps grows stronger. When they reach the tower's top chamber, they find a wide, circular room with tall windows that open into the morning light. The space is empty at first glance, but the emptiness feels staged, like a breath held too long. Then the air ripples. At the center of the room, colors begin to gather, swirling in soft spirals like paint pulled across water. Slowly, the spirals form a shape. A figure without clear features, shifting and stretching as if half remembered by the world around it. A guardian of the Paintress. One left behind to protect whatever lies hidden here. The creature moves like a brushstroke carried by wind. Its body warps fluidly, colors sliding across its form. Maelle tenses, grip firm on her weapon, while Lune begins weaving invisible lines into the air, sigils of protection that glow gently around the group. Sciel steps forward, blades angled with calm precision. The creature attacks. Its limbs smear across the floor in streaks of vivid color, striking with sudden force. Gustave meets it head-on, his mechanical arm releasing waves of energy that send ripples through the creature's shifting form. Sciel's strikes follow in graceful arcs, slicing through trails of fluid pigment. Maelle's movements are sharp and focused, supporting each of their openings with precision. Lune finishes a spell, tracing a glowing pattern that descends like soft light around the creature, momentarily holding it in place. Gustave drives forward, delivering the final blow. The creature shudders, its colors unraveling like paint washed away in rain, until nothing remains but drifting flecks of pigment that settle gently onto the stone floor. Silence returns to the tower. At the center of the room, revealed only now that the guardian has faded, stands a pedestal. Resting upon it is an old painter's palette, cracked and aged. 7 wells of dried paint remain, each a different color, faintly glowing. Lune steps forward with careful reverence, leaning in to read the carved inscription beneath it. Her brush follows grief. Where sorrow deepens, her number descends. The words sink into the quiet of the chamber. A clue, fragile and haunting. An indication that the Paintress's choices may be tied not to cruelty, but to suffering. The group stands in stillness, letting the meaning settle around them like settling dust. Gustave feels the weight of those words echo within him, stirring memories he isn't ready to face. When they leave the tower, the morning light has grown brighter. Shadows stretch across the land, long and soft. Ahead lies a path leading deeper into the mainland, toward ruins, creatures, answers, and truths untouched for generations. And as Expedition 33 steps away from the Tower of Echoes, the world around them seems to shift, as though waking slowly from a dream. The morning stretches across the mainland in soft strokes of gold and pale rose, warming the ground beneath the expedition's feet as they leave the watchtower behind. The air is cool but gentle, carrying faint hints of distant flowers, strange blooms that seem to shift colors subtly with each passing breeze. Far off, the ruins of old settlements lie quiet, their outlines softened by time, as though the world has tried to paint over them again and again, but could never fully erase the memories they held. Gustave walks at the front, his gaze sweeping across the open plains ahead. The weight of the inscription they discovered, "Her brush follows grief," sits quietly in his mind. He doesn't speak it aloud. The others feel its truth as well, each of them carrying their own interpretation of those haunting words. The Paintress's power, so distant and divine, suddenly feels more human than any of them expected, more vulnerable. The land around them begins to open into wide fields, tall grasses swaying in colors that seem impossible. Soft blues, muted purples, pale greens with hints of silver threading through them. It is beautiful, but in a way that feels slightly unreal, like a dream someone else painted long ago. Maelle reaches out to touch a strand of the shimmering grass, watching as its color shifts beneath her fingertips before settling back to its original hue. They travel in quiet harmony, listening to the subtle sounds of the world waking. The rustling of leaves, the soft chirps of distant creatures, the hush of wind sweeping across the plains. Every now and then, Sciel hums a low tune under his breath, something steady and warm that keeps their steps in gentle rhythm. After some time, they come across remnants of an old village. Stone houses stand in partial ruin, their roofs collapsed inward, their walls softened by weather and silence. Doorways gape open, showing rooms filled with drifting sunlight and broken furniture. In the center of the village, a dry fountain sits beneath a twisted tree. Its petals fall slowly, dissolving into faint trails of color before they even touch the ground. Gustave pauses at the edge of the fountain, noticing the faint outlines etched along its basin. Faces, perhaps once carved into the stone, now smoothed into near memory by the gradual erasing of the gommage. Lune studies the marks more closely. Some of the lines remain, forming incomplete sketches of the people who once lived here. "It's like the world tried to forget them," she murmurs. Maelle kneels beside her, tracing the faint grooves. Or maybe it tried too hard to remember. Their journey continues beyond the village, where the fields begin to narrow into a path bordered by tall, slender stones. Hidden among the grass are splashes of dried paint, streaks of red, yellow, and violet that form no clear pattern but suggest movement, conflict, or the remnants of some long-ago struggle. Lune slows her pace, sensing a shift in the air. Her quill glimmers faintly at the tip as she listens. The magic in the land feels restless, disturbed as if something is drawing its attention. Sciel notices too, resting his hand lightly on his weapon, eyes scanning the horizon. A breeze passes through the plains, heavier than before, carrying with it a sound, soft at first, then clearer. A whisper. Not spoken words, but the fluttering of pigment being stirred, like pages flipping in a book that no one is touching. The grass nearby trembles. Gustave steps forward as colors begin to gather at the edges of the fields. The pigments swirl through the air, pulled together as though guided by invisible hands. Slowly, a shape forms. A creature smaller than the guardian in the tower, but quicker, sharper in outline. Its body flickers between colors, unable to settle on a single form, as though caught between several unfinished brushstrokes. It rushes toward them with surprising speed. Maelle moves first, shifting aside with light, trained agility. Sciel intercepts the creature's swipe with a graceful parry, the impact spreading a burst of color across the grass. Lune lifts her hand, tracing patterns that form a protective veil around the group. Gustave charges forward, using his mechanical arm to ground the creature's momentum, his movements smooth and practiced. The creature lashes out in erratic, paint-like motions, but the expedition fights in steady unison. After several swift exchanges, the creature dissolves into a cloud of faint pigment, swept away by the breeze until nothing remains but soft traces of color scattered across the ground. The plains fall silent once more. Gustave scans the field, breathing steadily. The creature was weaker than the guardian, yet its presence feels significant. Lune steps to his side, looking out toward the horizon. "The closer we get," she says softly, "the more the land reacts." Maelle picks up a petal that flutters past her, its color fading, then brightening again, as though the world itself is unsure what form to take. She places it gently back into the wind. The expedition continues forward, guided by the growing understanding that every step deeper into the mainland will pull more secrets from the world's hidden corners. Secrets tied to the Paintress's grief, to the ebb and flow of the Gommage, and to the generations erased before them. The fields stretch into rolling hills ahead, their colors blending into a distant haze. And in that haze lies the next part of their journey, the first sign of a place where the Paintress's sorrow left its deepest mark. The rolling hills guide the expedition forward in a slow, gentle rhythm, each step carrying them farther from the safety of Lumiere and deeper into the mysteries of the mainland. The colors in the distance begin to blur together, as though the world has been brushed with soft strokes meant to hide something beneath. The wind whispers through the tall grass, its voice shifting in tone like fragments of long-lost songs. As they crest a hill, a small village reveals itself in the valley below. But unlike the earlier ruins they passed, this place feels almost suspended in time. The buildings stand intact, their shapes sturdy and familiar. Chimneys rise into the sky, though no smoke curls upward. The streets look walked upon, yet no footprints disturb the surface of the faded dust. Everything appears as if the people living here simply stepped away for a moment, intending to return, but never did. Gustave pauses at the sight, sensing something different here. Less ruin, more remembrance. Maelle walks ahead, her expression softening as she looks around. Sciel and Lune stay close, studying the air, noticing how it thickens slightly the closer they draw to the village center. As they enter the quiet streets, a faint sound begins to rise around them. Not words, not footsteps, but echoes. Soft, distant murmurs that feel like threads of conversations that once filled these homes. They drift in and out, barely audible, like memories repeating themselves in the wind. Lune closes her eyes, letting the echoes settle into her awareness. "These aren't spirits," she says softly. "They're impressions, what's left of the people who lived here. The Gommage happened while this place still held life." The group walks slowly through the village. Doors are half open, curtains gently swaying, tables set with plates that have gathered only a thin layer of dust. A child's wooden toy lies in the dirt near a doorway, untouched. A paintbrush rests beside a small easel on someone's porch, its last stroke forever paused. Everything feels frozen, paused in the moment before disappearance. In the village square, a fountain stands at the center. It is empty of water, but the stone carvings along its sides shimmer faintly, as though brushed by light that doesn't come from the sun. Gustave approaches and notices the engravings, a family of 4, etched in soft, flowing lines. But their faces have been smoothed away, leaving faint outlines where identities once were. A tremor of grief passes through the group. Each of them feels the weight of what was lost here. Maelle steps away from the fountain, her gaze drawing toward a narrow alley at the edge of the square. There, a figure seems to flicker briefly, a silhouette made of soft colors, as though someone painted a person in watercolors and let the image bleed before it fully dried. Gustave sees it too, and the group moves carefully toward it. The figure doesn't move aggressively. It drifts, its form bending and fading like a memory caught in shifting light. Lune approaches with quiet caution, sensing the nature of it. "This one isn't a guardian," she whispers. "It's a remnant." The remnant shifts, creating faint impressions of gestures, hands sweeping, head turning, as though reenacting moments that no longer exist. Its form begins to pulse, the colors brightening and dimming in uneven intervals. Suddenly, it splits into 2 shapes, both blurring at the edges before recombining. The echo of a voice emerges, broken and airy, like a sentence spoken underwater. Then the remnant destabilizes. Its calm movements twist into erratic swirls, and the colors intensify. What was once a gentle memory begins turning into a creature of shifting pigment, reacting to the presence of living beings in its space. Gustave braces himself, stepping forward with his mechanical arm ready. Sciel steadies his stance, blades reflecting the faint colors that dance around them. Maelle moves into position, and Lune begins crafting a sigil of containment. The creature lashes outward with quick, chaotic strokes, its form stretching unnaturally. But its attacks are unsteady, fueled not by intent, but by fragmented echoes of emotion. The group fights with caution, Gustave intercepting its volatile movements, Sciel striking only when openings appear, Maelle weaving between bursts of pigment to deliver controlled blows. Lune completes her containment sigil just as the creature destabilizes further. The glowing lines surround it, bending the swirling pigments inward until the form collapses softly, dissolving into fine dust that spirals upward before fading into the quiet air. The village falls silent again. A heaviness lingers, not from danger, but from the sorrow that fills this place. Gustave looks around at the empty homes, the abandoned belongings, the stillness carved into every corner. The Gommage did not just take lives. It left behind the echoes of people who were once real, once laughing, once dreaming. Sciel breaks the silence gently. There must be something here the past expeditions missed. Lune searches the air again, sensing faint magical residue gathering near the northern edge of the village. "Something is calling from beyond," she says. "Not a remnant, something structured." Maelle meets Gustave's gaze. "We should follow it. Whatever left this village like this, it's connected to the Paintress." The path ahead leads out of the fading village, toward hills where the colors deepen in strange, unnatural ways. The air shifts again, guiding the expedition forward through a place that still breathes with the remnants of erased lives. And as they leave the village behind, the echoes fade. But the weight of them stays with the group, a quiet reminder of what they are fighting to stop. The expedition follows the narrow path leading out of the abandoned village, their footsteps soft against the muted earth. The echoes left behind fade slowly, as though reluctant to release their hold on the living. Ahead, the land begins to shift in subtle but unmistakable ways. The hills rise gently, rolling upward into soft curves, but the colors across their surface deepen into richer, stranger hues. Blues that pulse like breathing, reds that seem to shimmer under sunlight, greens tinged with a quiet glow. As they climb, the air changes. A faint breeze brushes past them, carrying threads of pigment that drift like dust motes. The wind moves in slow spirals, as if painted into motion by a patient hand. The sensation is neither threatening nor welcoming. It simply exists, indifferent to whether anyone walks through it. Maelle touches one of the drifting flecks as it passes her hand. It dissolves instantly into a tiny spark of light. She glances at Lune, who studies the movement with a thoughtful gaze. "This magic isn't hostile," Lune murmurs. "It's guidance, or memory. The land is shaped by her emotions." Gustave takes a quiet breath, trying to sense the same thing Lune feels. The wind carries something more than pigment, something felt before it's heard. A soft hum beneath consciousness, like distant humming through stone. As they crest the top of the hill, the view opens into a vast stretch of landscape. The colors swirl in slow currents, almost like the sky has fallen and is drifting along the ground. But deeper within it, they notice shapes, structures, perhaps ruins, or perhaps something else entirely, just far enough to blur into suggestion. The mainland feels alive in a way that is not natural, but not malevolent either. Sciel squints toward the horizon. Whatever lies ahead is closer than it looks. Before they descend the hill, the wind suddenly shifts direction. It curves sharply around the group, spiraling upward in a tight motion that pulls loose pigments from the ground. The air fills with floating colors, gathering together in front of them, swirling faster and faster until they form a pattern. Round, then elongated, then almost like a doorway. Then the shape vanishes in an instant, leaving only stillness. Lune exhales softly. "A warning," she says, "or an invitation." Gustave steps forward, feeling the pull of something he cannot name. The wind grows cooler as they descend the hill. The grass rustles in soft waves. Every now and then, a flicker of color leaps from one patch of ground to another, like sparks passing between wires. When they reach the base of the hill, they find a trail, a narrow ribbon of pale stone winding between patches of deep-hued grass. The stones appear naturally shaped, yet the smoothness of their surfaces suggests they were crafted by intention. Gustave kneels to inspect one. Its edge is warm, humming faintly beneath his touch. Sciel steps beside him. "This wasn't built recently." "No," Lune says from behind, her voice soft. "But neither was it abandoned." The trail guides them deeper into the hills, toward a small glade nestled between two rising slopes. As they enter, the atmosphere changes again. The air thickens, carrying the faint scent of something sweet, almost floral, but tinged with pigment. In the center of the glade stands a large stone arch, half buried in grass and overgrown vines. Etched along its surface are patterns of swirling lines, flowing like brushstrokes frozen into stone. Gustave reaches out to touch the arch, and the moment his fingers brush the cool surface, a pulse of color radiates outward. The vines recoil slightly, as though disturbed from sleep. The brushstroke markings shimmer, revealing faint text hidden beneath. "Here rests the sorrow of the first unsent." Maelle tilts her head, puzzled. "Unsent? Like those erased?" Lune shakes her head slowly. "No, this is older. Before the Gommage, before the Paintress began choosing ages." The air shivers. Without warning, the colors around the arch draw inward, gathering at its center. A figure slowly forms within the stone frame. Not a guardian. Its shape is too stable, its movements too intentional. It resembles a woman, or the outline of one, her features blurred by swirling pigment. Unlike the remnants in the village, this presence stands with purpose. Her gaze, though faceless, turns slowly toward Gustave. For a brief moment, the world falls silent. A sound emerges from the figure, soft, layered, almost like harmonies whispered through water. Not words, but meaning threads through the air regardless. A memory, a plea, a remnant of grief so old it has forgotten its origin. The figure raises an arm, pointing past the hills, toward the distant shapes on the horizon. Then, like a stroke wiped from a canvas, she dissolves into drifting motes of color that scatter into the wind. The arch falls still again. Maelle swallows. What was she showing us? Gustave looks toward the distant forms, ruins softened by time, touched by shifting light. Something fragile rests there, something tied to the paintress's earliest sorrow. He turns back to the group, his voice quiet but steady. We follow her direction. They step beyond the arch, the wind brushing past them again in gentle spirals, guiding their steps toward whatever truth waits hidden in the land ahead. Truths carved in grief, in memory, and in the first strokes of a story the world has tried for decades to erase. The land beyond the arch grows stranger as the expedition moves forward, the colors deepening in ways that feel almost deliberate, as though each hue has been chosen with care by an unseen artist. The hills soften into low, rolling plains, and the air settles into a hush so complete that every footstep feels louder than it should. Even the wind seems to move more cautiously here, careful not to disturb whatever lies ahead. The distant shapes they glimpsed earlier begin to take form. Structures half sunk into the landscape, softened by time and touched with strokes of color that glow faintly under the filtered sunlight. As they draw nearer, the shapes resolve into the remains of a settlement, far older than the village they encountered before. Its design is different too, not built from stone carved crudely by hand, but from smooth walls shaped in elegant curves, each surface etched with swirling patterns that drift in and out of visibility. Gustave slows his pace. The air feels thick, like a memory suspended in place. Maelle moves quietly beside him, her eyes wide as she takes in the ruins. Sciel's steps become more deliberate, and Lune's fingers drift gently along the edges of the crumbling walls, tracing the faint magic pulsating beneath the surface. At the heart of the ruins stands a large, circular platform. It is sunken slightly into the earth, surrounded by pillars that once reached upward, but now stand broken, leaning, or toppled completely. Despite the decay, the platform itself remains intact, smooth, flawless, untouched by erosion. Its surface is painted with a vast mural, though much of it has faded. Colors swirl in overlapping patterns, forming scenes too worn to decipher. Lune kneels at the edge of the platform, brushing her hand over one of the clearer sections. A figure appears there, long-limbed, graceful, her silhouette unmistakably similar to the Paintress. But she is not raising her brush in this image. Instead, she is kneeling, her head bowed, surrounded by people whose faces are carved with expressions of grief or fear, or perhaps both. Maelle moves around the platform slowly, looking at the scattered images. These were painted long before the Gommage, she says softly. The style, it's old, ancient. Sciel lifts a broken shard of a pillar and inspects the underside. Whoever lived here, they knew her. Not as a distant figure, but as someone close. The thought lingers in the still air. Gustave steps onto the platform. The moment his foot touches the surface, a pulse of light ripples outward. The faded paint beneath his feet brightens, colors flowing into place like water rushing back into carved channels. The mural awakens around them. Shapes sharpen, lines reform. The world of the painting rises from dim memory into clarity. The images shift, weaving a story. A flourishing settlement, people gathering in celebration. A woman with a brush, smiling gently as she paints murals for the community. Children running to her side, offering pigments, dancing in her shadow. A life before the Gommage, before the erasing, before grief carved itself into the land. Then the tone shifts. Dark streaks cut across the images. The paintress's figure stands alone, her posture turned inward, hands trembling. Around her, the faces of the people blur, fade, dissolve. The colors of the landscape warp, twisting into something unstable. A single line appears across the mural, deep, jagged, deliberate. A line that splits the before from the after. Gustave watches each scene unfold at his feet, his chest tightening as if absorbing the emotion captured in the strokes. The paintress had not begun as a destroyer. She had been cherished, connected, beloved even. Something happened here, something that fractured not only the settlement, but her spirit. Something that turned her brush from creation to erasure. Lune breathes out slowly. This is the moment everything changed. The first sorrow. The air around them stirs. Pigment rises from the mural, swirling upward, gathering above the platform in a slow spiral. The colors merge, forming a faint outline of a face. Gentle, mournful, filled with aching memory. The figure does not fully form, but her presence radiates an emotion so heavy that all 4 members of the expedition feel it settle deep within them. A sound emerges, soft, tremulous, like the beginning of a sob that never breaks open. A plea for something lost, a pain too great to contain. Then, as the pigment shakes, the sorrow deepens into something sharper, something the land has carried for years without release. The figure collapses into a burst of color. A creature forms from the collapse. It rises from the shattered pigments, tall, wavering, shaped from violent strokes that clash against each other. This is not a memory or remnant. It is grief itself, given shape and substance by the awakening mural. Its arms lash outward, dripping heavy streaks of color that crack the earth where they land. Gustave braces himself. Sciel steps forward, blades shimmering with steady defiance. Maelle moves with sharp readiness, and Lune's hands glow as she begins weaving a containment sigil. The creature charges. Its movements are heavy, unbalanced, burdened by anguish. Each strike shakes the ground. Gustave intercepts one swing with his mechanical arm, the impact sending a jolt through the ground. Sciel finds openings between its colossal motions, striking with calm precision. Maelle darts in and out of reach, her timing perfect, her presence steady. Lune completes her sigil with a burst of light, binding the creature's movement long enough for the others to land decisive blows. At last, the creature collapses, its body unraveling into streams of paint that fall softly onto the mural. The image beneath them dims again, settling back into faded lines and muted hues. Silence returns. But the silence feels different now, fuller, more aware. Gustave looks at the others, the truth echoing in each of their expressions. The paintress did not begin as a destroyer. She began as someone who loved, who created, who lived among people who adored her. Something tore her world apart, and her grief reshaped the world. The path ahead continues beyond the ruins, descending toward lands where sorrow has carved deeper wounds, and where the expedition must go if they hope to reach the heart of the truth. The ruins grow smaller behind them, as Expedition 33 steps into a quiet stretch of land where the sky feels wider and the earth softer beneath their feet. The colors around them settle into muted tones, gentle grays, pale violets, and soft blues that seem to drift like watercolor left too long in rain. It is a peaceful place, but not an empty one. The hush in the air feels like the silence that follows a long cry, calm but fragile. They follow a winding trail shaped naturally into the landscape, each curve guiding them deeper into a valley where the hills part just enough to reveal what lies beyond. As they walk, Maelle notices something unusual. Small, abandoned items scattered along the path. A half-finished wooden toy, a small metal brooch, a bundle of dried flowers tied with faded ribbon. Each object untouched by decay, as though placed gently here by unseen hands. "These belong to someone," she whispers, her voice careful not to disturb the surrounding quiet. Lune lifts one of the items, a tiny clay sculpture shaped like a bird. The details are soft, worn not by time, but by handling, as if made by a child. She holds it delicately, sensing faint magic woven into its form. "These aren't things left behind," she murmurs. "They're pieces of dreams, someone's hopes, unfinished." Gustave looks down the path, his steps slowing. The items dotting the trail make the air feel heavier, yet tender. Each object carries a story that never reached its end, a fragment of a life that vanished before it could bloom. As they continue, the trail widens into a gentle field where tall grass sways slowly. In the center of the clearing stands a small building, round, dome-shaped, and painted in soft, swirling colors that fade in and out of view. It resembles a studio or a workshop, though its design is unlike anything they've seen so far. Its walls pulse faintly with life, as if breathing. The group approaches quietly. The closer they get, the more the air seems to hum with presence. When Gustave touches the doorframe, the studio responds with a shimmer of light. Inside, the space is filled with things that feel alive even without motion. Canvases rest against the walls, blank at first glance, but upon closer look they hold faint impressions of what might have been painted there. Scattered brushes lie on long tables, their bristles still stained with color. A half-finished mural curves across the far wall, its lines soft and incomplete, like a dream interrupted. Maelle walks slowly among the canvases, brushing her fingertips along their edges. "She was here," she says softly. "Before everything. This must have been hers." Lune's gaze drifts to the unfinished mural. And these were the dreams she hadn't finished yet. The room vibrates with emotion. Quiet, longing, full of the weight of creation that never found resolution. Gustave feels it in his chest, a soft ache that reminds him of moments he wished he could have held on to longer. Sciel approaches a small table by the window. A single journal rests there, its cover faded but intact. When he opens it, the pages flutter with a soft glow before settling. The writing inside is delicate, each line brushed with care. The entries begin with descriptions of ordinary life, painting festivals, shared meals, laughter echoing through the village. Then, slowly, the tone changes. She speaks of loss, of shadows growing where color once bloomed, of a sorrow that spread faster than she could paint over it. Her words grow more fragmented, the strokes more uneven. One entry reads clearly, "I cannot save them. I can only ease their grief." And below it, written lightly, almost like a whisper barely pressed into the page, "But grief keeps growing, and I am drowning in it." The journal ends there. Silence fills the room again, deeper than before. Lune gently closes the book. Whatever happened here, it was the beginning of her breaking. They move toward the mural once more. As the group stands before it, the half-finished image begins to glow. Lines ripple and shift, completing themselves just enough to reveal a scene. A crowd of people suffering, their faces turned toward the paintress. She stands at the center, overwhelmed, reaching outward with trembling hands. Her brush lies beside her, unused. The mural trembles, and from its surface, paint begins to lift. Slowly, gently, the pigments gather into a familiar form, one small and fragile. A tiny creature, shaped like a child's toy bird, rises from the colors, its wings barely formed, its body flickering. It tilts its head toward them, as though giving voice to something that cannot be spoken. Maelle kneels softly. "You were meant to be finished," she whispers to the small bird. "But she never got the chance, did she?" The creature flutters once, releasing a faint trail of glow that drifts toward the exit. It wants them to follow. The group steps out of the studio, and the bird leads them through the field, rising and falling in soft arcs. After a short distance, it stops at the edge of another path, one leading downward. A darker path, a quieter one. The bird dissolves there, fading into small sparks that drift away on the wind. Gustave looks ahead into the shadows. "This is where her sorrow fell deepest," he says softly. Lune nods. "And where the truth begins to sharpen." The path beckons them onward, toward the fractured heart of the world, and toward secrets the paintress never meant to reveal. The path narrows as Expedition 33 follows it downward, each step carrying them into a valley where the colors fade into muted grays and subdued blues. The air here hangs heavier, cooler, filled with a stillness that feels older than the ruins they've passed, older than the hills, older even than the memories of the land. The sky above seems reluctant to shine fully, its light softened into a pale, somber glow that casts no harsh shadows. The ground beneath their feet softens into earth that feels almost velvety, as though painted with layers of delicate strokes. Subtle currents of pigment drift through the air, moving slowly, as if weighed down by emotion rather than wind. Gustave's footsteps feel quieter here, each movement swallowed by the valley's quiet embrace. Ahead, the land opens into a wide hollow framed by pale stone outcroppings. Strange shapes rise from the ground, sculptures of people caught in moments of sorrow, their forms shaped not from stone or clay, but from hardened paint. Their expressions are faint, softened by time, but the emotion carved into their stances is unmistakable. Kneeling figures, figures reaching outward, figures curled inward, holding themselves. Maelle stops beside one of the sculptures, her eyes tracing the shape of a face without features. She reaches a careful hand toward it, but doesn't touch. "These weren't made for decoration," she says softly. "They were reactions." Lune steps closer, feeling the residual magic woven through each shape. Her voice is gentle, cautious. "The paintress didn't sculpt these. The sorrow in this place shaped them on its own." Gustave looks around the valley with quiet heaviness. These frozen forms, captured gestures of despair, speak of a tragedy that spread across the land long before the Gommage began. Their presence lingers in the air like the last notes of a sad song. The group moves deeper into the hollow, where a shallow pool stretches out in a long, narrow curve. Its surface is unnaturally smooth, still as glass. The water is clear at first glance, But when Maelle steps closer, she sees faint shapes shifting beneath its surface, colors drifting like submerged memories. Lune kneels beside the pool. "This is a mirror pool," she murmurs, "a place where emotions settle. Whatever happened here left an imprint." Gustave crouches beside her, staring into the reflection. At first, he sees only their own shapes, but then the water begins to shift. Colors bleed into the reflection, swirling into forms that are not their own. A crowd appears, hundreds of figures, their forms bending under the weight of visible grief. They stand gathered in the valley, heads bowed, shoulders shaking. The scene plays in silence, like a tableau made from memory and echo. At the center of them stands the Paintress. Not in divine robes, not in the ethereal form she takes during the Gommage, but in simple clothing, her brush lowered at her side, her expression one of unbearable sorrow. Her hands tremble, her knees weaken. She collapses, her brush falling beside her. The reflection darkens as another figure appears, someone lying on the ground near her. The Paintress reaches for them, shaking, desperate. But the image dissolves before their identity becomes clear, fading into swirling pigments that churn in the pool like storm clouds. The water stills again, returning to its crystal clarity. The group remains silent for a moment. Maelle's voice trembles slightly. "She lost someone." Sciel nods, his expression solemn. "Someone she loved." Lune adds softly, "And grief like that can reshape the world." Gustave watches the pool, the image of the collapsing Paintress echoing within him. It aligns with everything they've seen so far. Her life before the Gommage, the change that fractured her path, the sorrow that spread across the land and began to shape reality. They step away from the pool, moving deeper into the valley, where more sculptures stand in quiet mourning. The air grows cooler, and the low hum of magic thickens until every breath feels touched by history. At the far end of the hollow stands a large, partially collapsed structure. It resembles a temple or gathering hall, its columns leaning but still holding the remnants of a roof overhead. The entrance is wide, and faint trails of dried pigment streak across the floor, leading inside. Gustave feels a pull toward the structure, subtle but insistent. Inside, the hall opens into a wide chamber. Faded murals line the walls, each telling stories too worn to read fully. Broken pottery lies scattered on the ground, alongside dried wreaths and offerings that have long since lost their color. At the center of the room stands an altar made of smooth stone. Upon it rests a single brush, ancient, its bristles hardened, its handle cracked, but surrounded by a faint halo of color, as though refusing to fade entirely. Lune approaches it reverently. "This belonged to her," she whispers, "before she became the Paintress we know." As she speaks, the colors around the altar begin to stir, gathering upward until they coalesce into a small, trembling form. A creature rises, fragile, wavering, shaped from soft pastel hues. It does not attack. It watches them. A lingering piece of the past, a remnant formed from longing rather than rage. The creature moves toward the brush, pressing its small form against the relic with hesitant affection. Then it turns to the group, shivering slightly, as if asking for help. Gustave understands without words. "What is it trying to show us?" Lune answers softly. "The origin. The first wound. If we follow it, we may see what transformed her grief into the Gommage." The creature drifts toward the back of the chamber, where a narrow passage opens into deeper shadow. It hovers there, waiting. The path forward is darker, heavier, but filled with truth the expedition can no longer turn away from. The small pastel creature waits at the entrance to the narrow passage, its form trembling with soft light, as though uncertain whether to proceed without them. Gustave steps closer, and the creature responds by drifting gently forward, guiding them into the darkness. The moment the group enters the passage, the air changes, cooler, denser, filled with a quiet pressure that seems to press lightly against their skin. The tunnel walls curve naturally, but the surfaces carry faint brush-like textures, as though long ago they were shaped not by time, but by a careful hand. Soft pigments seep from cracks in the stone, glowing faintly and illuminating the path. The pastel creature floats ahead, its glow reflecting off the walls, casting gentle shadows that flicker like living sketches. As they walk deeper, the sounds of the hollow behind them fade away, replaced by something subtler, a slow, rhythmic pulse, like the heartbeat of a world remembering something it tried to forget. The passage opens into a vast underground chamber. The ceiling arches high above them, cracked by deep fissures where faint light spills through in thin, shimmering lines. Dried pigment splashes across the floor like relics of a chaotic moment frozen in time. At the center of the cavern lies a massive break in the earth, a jagged wound stretching outward like a starburst, each crack reaching across the chamber walls. The pastel creature drifts to the edge of the fracture and hovers there, trembling slightly. Lune gasps softly. "This is it. The first fracture." Maelle steps carefully toward the center, her voice hushed. "The moment her world split." Gustave feels the energy rising from the fissure, a mixture of grief, rage, and helplessness woven so densely into the space that his breath catches in his throat. This wasn't just a place where something broke. It was where someone broke. The air begins to shimmer. Pigments rise from the cracks, swirling upward as if called by the weight of remembered sorrow. Slowly, the pigments coalesce into a vision, not physical, but vivid enough to pull their attention entirely. The chamber around them fades. They stand in the same space, but as it once was, whole, bright, alive. People gather near the platform where the fracture would someday form. Their faces gleam with joy and anticipation. Children run through the hall, laughing. Musicians play gentle melodies. At the center stands the Paintress, not the divine figure known across the land today, but a woman full of warmth, her movements light, her smile radiant. Beside her stands someone dear, someone the world no longer remembers. The figure is blurred at the edges, but their closeness is unmistakable. The way they lean toward each other, the gentle touch on her arm, the tender glances exchanged. This was a celebration meant for creation, not loss. But the vision shifts abruptly. A crack resounds through the air, a deep, thundering sound. The ground trembles. At first, the people look confused, then frightened. The trembling intensifies, and cracks split through the earth, spreading like fractures in glass. The Paintress reaches for the person beside her, but the ground beneath them gives way. In a moment filled with silent horror, the figure falls into the widening abyss, their form swallowed by darkness. The Paintress screams, a sound so raw and full of shattering grief that even the vision trembles at its force. She tries to leap after them, but others pull her back. She fights against them desperately, her hands reaching toward the darkness, fingers curled in anguish. Her brush lies forgotten on the ground, its bristles trembling as pigment spills across the floor in chaotic streaks. Her scream echoes again, longer, deeper, until it becomes less a sound and more a force. The cavern around them shakes violently. Pigments explode outward, consumed by her grief, her rage, her despair. The colors around the chamber distort, unravel, reform in unnatural patterns. People disappear, not from age, not from a chosen number, but from the sheer collapse of her emotional control. Their forms scatter like loose paint struck by chaotic wind. As the vision reaches its climax, the fracture beneath her expands, splitting the land. And with it, something inside her fractures as well. Something essential. Something hopeful. The image fades. The chamber returns. The fissure at the center remains, still pulsing faintly with the residue of that ancient sorrow. The pastel creature dims slightly, bowing its tiny head toward the crack before drifting back to the expedition, its form weakened by the memory. Gustave breathes deeply, letting the truth settle into him. "She didn't choose to erase the world," he says quietly. "She lost everything at once, and the grief never stopped." Lune nods, her eyes soft. "And each year it grew heavier, until her brush followed it." Sciel steps closer to the fracture, his voice steady but solemn. "If this is where the first sorrow began, then the key to reaching her must lie beyond it." Maelle takes a slow breath. "And if we're going to stop the Gommage, we need to understand not just her power, but her pain." The pastel creature flickers once more and drifts toward a second passage leading out of the chamber, a path narrower and darker than the one they entered. It hovers there, glowing faintly, urging them onward. Gustave steps forward. "Then we follow her sorrow," he whispers, "and find the truth waiting at its end." The group moves together into the darkness, where the deepest wounds of the world await, and where the next piece of the Paintress's story will reveal itself. The narrow passage carries them away from the chamber of the first fracture, its walls curving gently as if shaped by hands too tired to finish their work. The air grows cooler the deeper they walk, and small flecks of pale color drift from the ceiling like quiet snowfall. The pastel creature leads them onward, its body dimmed but still glowing softly, its wings fluttering with the weight of memory. Eventually, the passage widens. Light begins to filter in, soft, muted, tinged with something warm. The expedition steps into a garden, or rather, what was once a garden. The space is vast, stretching in gentle arcs beneath a natural dome of stone. Slender branches rise overhead, weaving together like fingers reaching for one another. Flowers fill the area in clusters, but their colors are dulled, their petals drooping as though they lack the strength to hold themselves open. The scent in the air is faint, like a memory of sweetness rather than sweetness itself. Sciel kneels beside a wilted sunflower-like bloom, brushing its petals gently. The flower shifts slightly under his touch, regaining a hint of color before fading back again. "This place is tired," he murmurs. Lune closes her eyes, feeling the garden's pulse. "Not tired, waiting." Gustave steps farther in. The ground beneath them is soft, covered in grass that seems to sigh with each footstep. As he moves, he notices something near the center of the garden, a large stone fountain, its basin dry, its carvings washed pale by years of quiet sorrow. Around its edges lie tools, a rusted watering can, a fallen brush, a broken pot filled with crumbled soil. Maelle lifts the watering can. Its handle is delicate, shaped like a swirling vine. "She tended this place," she whispers. This was hers. The pastel creature drifts toward a cluster of flowers and hovers above one of them. The bloom shivers, then opens just a fraction, revealing a color so vibrant it stands out like a heartbeat in the quiet space. Gustave watches it. She created beauty here, even after the fracture. Lune nods. She was trying to heal. But as the group moves through the garden, deeper signs of change become clearer. On the far side, plants twist unnaturally. Colors bleed into one another, forming streaks that pool along the ground. Some flowers grow in spirals that seem almost pained, their shapes distorted as if pulled in several directions at once. Grief had reached even here. Grief had reshaped even what she loved. At the base of a leaning willow tree, they find a small stone bench, its seat worn smooth. A discarded sketchbook rests on it, pages curled from moisture. Maelle opens it carefully. The first pages show drawings, soft, hopeful images of flowers and vines, simple lines filled with gentle charm. But the drawings change quickly. The lines become frantic, the colors heavier. Flowers begin to blur into indistinct shapes, their petals dissolving into streaks. The final pages contain only swirls, vortices of dark pigment that pull the eye inward. Maelle closes the book. She came here to find peace, and it slipped away from her. Lune touches a tree trunk. She could create beauty with a brush, but she couldn't create healing for herself. A soft rustling stirs the garden. The petals of nearby flowers tremble. Grass shifts in small waves. Pigment seeps upward from the ground, gathering in small pools at the bases of the plants. Gustave tenses. The pastel creature reacts, fluttering toward the center of the garden in a hurry, glowing brighter as if calling out. The ground vibrates. The pigment pools rise, forming small, fragile shapes, tiny figures shaped like unfinished dreams. Not hostile, but trembling, confused, incomplete. They drift like butterflies made of paint, wings flickering unevenly. One bumping against another causes a ripple, an accidental surge of magic. Suddenly, all the small forms merge, collapsing inward like droplets joining into a single mass. The pigments swirl rapidly, forming a larger creature, tall, hunched, its body composed of twisting vines and petals and streaks of sorrowful color. Its face is a smear of emotion, flickering between hope, despair, longing, and fear. It does not roar. It simply shudders, like something that never wanted to be born. The creature lunges. Gustave intercepts it, bracing himself as its mass presses forward with surprising weight. Sciel darts in, striking at vine-like limbs before they can wrap around anyone. Maelle moves with swift precision, cutting away tendrils that try to pull the creature back together. Lune raises her hands, forming protective barriers that shimmer like glass, redirecting bursts of pigment that splash outward in waves. The creature's attacks feel unbalanced, as though driven not by anger, but by overwhelming confusion. It lashes out, then recoils, its shape flickering as if unsure what form it should take. Gustave sees its hesitation, a moment where its motions falter. He speaks softly, almost to himself. This was something she didn't finish either. Lune steps forward, weaving a sigil not of containment, but of calming magic. Light pours from her hands in thin, gliding strands. The creature pauses, struggling against the spell, but slowly, reluctantly, it lowers its limbs. The pastel creature drifts forward, glowing brighter. It presses gently against the larger mass, colors still. Branches untangle. The creature dissolves into soft particles that flutter downward like petals carried by wind. Silence returns to the garden. Gustave looks around, seeing not danger, but grief lingering in corners where joy once grew. She tried to build a place to heal, he says quietly, but her sorrow kept finding her. Lune nods. It followed her everywhere, and everywhere it touched, it reshaped the world. The pastel creature moves once more, guiding them to a hidden path at the back of the garden. This path is narrow, shadowed, lined with withered trees whose bark is streaked with colors long faded. The air hums with deeper emotion, something heavier, something unresolved. Sciel looks at Gustave. Whatever lies ahead, it's closer to the heart of her grief. Gustave breathes steadily. Then we keep going. The group steps forward, leaving the forgotten garden behind, and walking into a deeper layer of the Paintress's sorrow, one she never intended for anyone to find. The hidden path that leaves the wilted garden winds downward between withered trees whose bark bears traces of old color. Barely there streaks, like memories of flowers that used to bloom here. The air grows even cooler, dense with something that feels older than grief, older than memory itself. The pastel creature drifts ahead, its glow subdued but unwavering, guiding them deeper beneath the land. Soon, the path ends at a hollow in the earth, where stone steps spiral downward in a slow, careful curve. These steps are carved with marks that look almost like footprints, soft indentations smoothed over time. Gustave runs his fingers along them as they descend. Each one feels worn, as though walked on again and again by someone tracing the same path in endless circles. "Someone came here often," Maelle says softly. "Or needed to," Lune murmurs. The staircase leads them into a wide cavern, lit only by the faint glow of pigments dripping down the walls. The pigments run in slender streams, forming patterns like tears that dried before they hit the ground. Some shimmer brightly, others have faded to almost nothing. Gustave looks up at them. "These aren't natural," he says quietly. "No," Luna replies. "They're emotional echoes, carved into the stone by sorrow." They move deeper into the cavern until the space opens into a large chamber with a high ceiling, supported by curving columns that resemble brushstrokes turned solid. At the very center stands a circular platform surrounded by low stone benches, each carved with the suggestion of soft cushions, places clearly meant for people to sit, watch, gather. It is a meeting place. Or rather, it was. As they step onto the platform, the pigments on the walls begin to brighten. Light spills gently across the floor, and the air trembles with the stirrings of memory. Then, just as in the fracture chamber, a vision forms around them, soft at first, then clear enough to blend with reality. They stand in the same room, but alive and filled with people. The benches are occupied by villagers and artisans, children and elders, all facing a central dais. Their faces are full of hope. The paintress stands there too, young, vibrant, her brush held gently in her hand. Beside her stands the blurred figure seen in earlier visions, someone dear, someone deeply loved. Their presence together fills the room with warmth. On the dais lies a scroll, unrolled across a long table, covered in symbols of unity and growth. The paintress touches it lightly with her brush, adding flourishes to the edges while speaking softly about her vision for the community. Gardens to bloom, murals to inspire, safe spaces for children to learn, hallways filled with color and life. This was a place of promise, a place of plans, a place where love and creation shaped the future. But then, the vision begins to tremble. The crowd's faces blur, the warmth drains, the colors distort. The blurred figure beside her steps forward to speak, but their words twist into silence. Their hand reaches toward the paintress, and midway through the gesture, they vanish. Not fallen, not taken by fracture, erased, not by choice, not by nature, by grief itself. The paintress staggers as the room ripples. Her brush drops from her hand, clattering across the floor. She falls to her knees, reaching desperately for the place where the figure once stood. But the vision shimmers again, showing the same moment from a different angle. Her reaching, failing, reaching again, her breath breaking into sobs that shake the foundation of the chamber. The crowd rushes to her, trying to help, but one by one their forms waver, fade, disappear. Their laughter, their voices, their hopes, all erased, as though sorrow itself is wiping the slate clean. The paintress screams, a sound that shatters the vision and sends cracks rippling across the walls of the real chamber around them. The vision ends. The pigments dim. Silence falls. Gustave stands at the center of the platform, breathing heavily, as if the grief of the memory pressed its weight into his chest. "She didn't choose to erase the world," he whispers. "She couldn't stop it." Lune kneels by the dais where the paintress once stood. Her grief, it became magic stronger than anything she could control. And every year it grew heavier. The Gommage wasn't a punishment. It was an overflow. Sciel walks to the edge of the chamber, his expression solemn. Then the solution isn't just to stop her power. We have to address the cause. Maelle looks at the low benches where families once sat, her voice small but steady. She lost everything she loved, and her heart kept breaking, year after year. The pastel creature moves forward, landing gently on one of the benches, as if acknowledging the memories still lingering there. It glows faintly, then turns toward another passage, leading deeper underground. "This path is darker," Lune says, "where grief grows heavier, and where the Gommage began to take shape." Gustave nods. "We go." They follow the creature into the passage, leaving behind the chamber of forgotten steps and entering a deeper layer of sorrow. One where the truth is no longer painted in memories, but carved into the very foundation of the world. The passage leading out of the chamber of forgotten steps narrows into a long, dim corridor. The air grows colder with each breath, but not in a way that chills the skin. This cold settles somewhere deeper, somewhere closer to the heart. The walls curve inward, as though trying to shelter the memories they contain, and soft streams of faded pigment drip down their surfaces like tears that never fully dried. The pastel creature moves slowly now. Its glow flickers with an almost hesitant rhythm, as if even guiding the expedition through this place weighs on it. Gustave keeps close, steadying his steps as the corridor opens into a chamber wider than any they have seen so far. A low hum fills the space, soft, constant, a sound that feels more like breath than vibration. As the chamber brightens, they see why. Thousands of ribbons drift through the air, thin, weightless strands of color that move gently as though stirred by invisible hands. Each ribbon glows faintly, carrying a different hue, some bright, some nearly faded to gray. And on every ribbon Letters shimmer faintly. Lune's breath catches. These are ages. Maelle steps forward, letting one ribbon drift across her fingertips. The letters shimmer softly, shifting into clarity. Age 73. Another floats by, marked age 64. Then age 51. All the ages once erased. All drifting silently in the vast chamber, like remnants of lives that once were. Sciel watches the ribbons swirl overhead. She kept them, he says quietly. She never forgot. Gustave lifts one ribbon as it floats near him. Age 33 glows softly along its length. A knot tightens in his chest. Sophie's age, the moment she vanished. And here, her age rests, drifting like a tear caught mid-fall. Lune walks deeper into the hall, tracing the paths of the ribbons with her eyes. This isn't a monument, she says softly. It's a place of remembering. For her. For all she lost. The chamber extends far beyond sight, a gentle glow illuminating swaths of drifting color. Some ribbons flicker brightly, others dim and fade, as though on the edge of disappearing. The pastel creature flutters toward a cluster of nearly gray strands, ages erased long ago, their memory dimming. It presses itself gently against them, giving off a soft light. The gray ribbons brighten, just a little. Maelle watches with a trembling breath. She never meant to erase them. She tried to keep them alive, in the only way she could. As the group moves through the hall, the ribbons tremble in their passing. The hum in the air changes pitch, softening into a tone almost like a distant voice murmuring through the weight of time. Gustave follows the pastel creature toward the far end of the chamber, where the ribbons grow sparse and the walls bend inward to form a smaller alcove. Here, a pedestal stands, carved with delicate brushwork. Upon it rests a single ribbon, isolated from the others. Its color is stark white, empty, unfilled. No age written, no name attached. Just a blank ribbon glowing faintly. Lune steps close. This one is different, she whispers. It's not a memory. It's a promise. A promise of what? Maelle asks softly. Lune touches the ribbon. It brightens in her hand, warm like a heartbeat. A promise of the year she feared most, the age she never wanted to erase. Gustave steps forward, understanding dawning slowly. The year the number reaches us. The pastel creature flutters upward, circling the blank ribbon once before drifting toward the back wall, where a final doorway waits. Tall, narrow, and framed by swirling pigments that pulse like a slow heartbeat. This passage is darker than the others, its glow dim and uneven. A place where emotion thickens into something more powerful, more dangerous. Sciel tightens his grip on his weapons. We're getting close. Lune nods, her voice calm but solemn. This next place won't show us memories the way the others did. It may show us the reason she could not stop, the force that grew inside her. Gustave looks at the suspended ribbons one last time, each drifting softly, caught in a perpetual dance of remembrance. He feels their weight, their stories, their silent pleas. Every erased age, every vanished life. He turns toward the doorway. Then we go forward, he says quietly, to the place where names disappear before they're ever spoken. The pastel creature leads them through the archway, into a darkness threaded with faint glimmers of color. like fireflies trapped in a forgotten dream. Ahead lies the heart of the Gommage, the force that grew from one moment of sorrow into a cycle that consumed the world. The passage beyond the Hall of Unspoken Names is narrower than before, its walls curving inward like a throat swallowing light. Pigments pulse faintly along the surface, moving in slow, trembling waves. The pastel creature hovers ahead, its glow dim but resolute, guiding them deeper into the hidden heart of the mainland. The air shifts again, cooler, heavier, tinged with a feeling none of them can quite name. It's not fear, not danger. It is something softer but deeper. The sensation of stepping into someone's private grief. The corridor opens suddenly into a vast chamber, and they all stop. The space is enormous, domed like a cathedral carved from the earth itself. The ceiling curves high overhead, streaked with long trails of pigment that drip downward like frozen tears. Along the walls, thick vines formed from hardened paint twist together, reaching up toward the ceiling in long, sorrowful arcs. Pools of color gather on the floor in gentle ripples, glowing faintly from within. The room feels alive with emotion, raw, unfiltered, uncontained. Lune exhales softly. This is the source. The place where her grief settled when it grew too heavy for the world above. Maelle moves toward one of the paint pools. As she kneels beside it, a faint image reflects on its surface. Not her own reflection, but a pair of hands trembling as they hold a fallen brush. The image flickers away before she can speak. Sciel scans the chamber, his gaze steady. She came here when she couldn't hold herself together. And the world changed with her, Gustave murmurs. At the center of the atrium stands a raised platform. Above it hangs a suspended swirl of pigment, an orb turning slowly in the air, threaded with colors that pulse like veins. Some streaks are soft and pastel, others are deep and storm-dark. It flickers between states, sometimes glowing brightly, sometimes dimming into shadow. The pastel creature drifts upward toward the orb, circling it once before returning to Gustave's shoulder. He looks closer. "It's unstable," he whispers. "Alive, but unraveling." Lune studies the orb intently. This is the emotional core she never released, the grief she buried instead of healing, the power she refused to unleash upon herself, so it leaked into the world. Maelle steps onto the platform, watching the orb swirl above her. If this grew stronger every year, then the Gommage was never a choice. It was a consequence. The chamber trembles, softly at first, then with a subtle pulse that shivers through the stone. The orb brightens. A low sound spreads through the air, resonating like a sob swallowed halfway through. Pigments rise from the pools around the platform, swirling upward, drawn to the orb's energy. They twist together, forming shapes. Faces blurred with pain, hands reaching upward, silhouettes curling inward. These are not memories. These are manifestations, emotions given form. And as they gather, the chamber grows darker, the colors deepening into storm-like hues. The swirling pigments coalesce into a single shape. A creature emerges, massive, formed from layers and layers of swirling sorrow. Its body ripples with shifting emotions, regret winding down its arms, fear trembling through its chest, loneliness bleeding through its steps. Its face is a mask of unfinished strokes, constantly reshaping itself. Lune stiffens. This is the heart of the first Gommage. Gustave steps forward, steady and calm. Then we face it. The creature moves. It doesn't roar. It doesn't charge. It collapses forward as though pulled by the weight of its own sorrow, falling into a motion that becomes a sweeping attack of pigment-heavy force. Gustave intercepts the blow with his mechanical arm, the impact sending ripples of color across the floor. Sciel darts in, striking at the swirling joints of the creature's form. Maelle moves with sharp agility, delivering precise blows that break apart sections of pigment before they reform. Lune creates shimmering veils of magic that catch bursts of emotional energy before they reach the group. The creature grows more frantic. Its movements distort, its colors flicker, its sorrow spills outward in trembling waves that make the walls vibrate. Then Gustave sees it, a place where the orb's influence dips, a brief lapse in the creature's cohesion. "Now," he calls. They move together, hitting the weakened point with unified force. The creature's form fractures, colors exploding outward in a brilliant bloom of pigment before dissolving into soft, drifting motes that rain gently onto the platform. The orb dims, trembling weakly but no longer swelling with violent emotion. Slowly, the pigments settle. The chamber breathes. Silence returns, deep, profound, and weighted with understanding. Maelle looks up at the suspended orb. "She kept this inside her for so long." Lune's voice is quiet. "It grew because she wouldn't let herself grieve, because she tried to bear it alone." Gustave steps beneath the orb, watching its colors swirl more softly now. "This isn't her power. This is her suffering." Sciel nods. "And as long as it grows, the Gommage continues." The pastel creature lands gently on the platform, its glow stabilizing. It turns toward another exit, a tall door carved into the far wall of the atrium. The pigments along its edges shimmer faintly, as though guarding something sacred. "That way," Lune says, "to the place where sorrow turned into intention, and where the path to the Paintress begins." Gustave's breath steadies. "Then that's where we're going." Together, they leave the weeping atrium behind, stepping through the towering door into the deeper truth that must be faced. The towering door closes behind the expedition with a soft, echoing sigh, sealing the weeping atrium and its trembling sorrow on the other side. Ahead stretches a long, gently curving corridor, carved from stone smoother than any they've seen so far. The pigments here are different, not dripping or trembling, but arranged in elegant lines that flow along the walls like deliberate strokes. Calm strokes. Controlled strokes. Gustave steps forward, noticing the shift immediately. "The air feels clearer here." Lune nods. "This isn't a place shaped by grief. It's shaped by her resolve." The corridor is lined with murals, each painted with such precision that even the faded sections still hold remnants of their original beauty. These scenes are not chaotic like the ones in the fracture chamber, nor are they sorrowful like those in the village of fading voices. These are moments of intention. On one wall, the Paintress stands tall, brushing color into the sky with sweeping motions. She is not broken in these images. She is composed, steady, her posture straight with purpose. People behind her smile, their faces clear, detailed, full of trust. Farther along, another mural shows her repairing a wall cracked by time, her brush mending the stone with strokes of light. Children gather around her, watching as the structure heals beneath her touch. The colors here glow faintly, carrying the warmth of creation. Maelle lingers at a panel where the paintress paints an orchard blossoming to life. The trees sprout from barren ground with petals bursting forth in waves of vivid pink. She rebuilt, Maelle murmurs. After the fracture, she tried to build the world up again. Sciel studies a mural where the paintress stands before a rising storm, her brush raised as though holding back the chaos. She fought the grief, he says. Fought it with everything she had. As they walk, the pastel creature glides close to the murals, as if paying its respects. Occasionally, it brushes gently against the painted surfaces, causing faint ripples of color to shimmer outward. But midway through the corridor, the murals begin to change. The colors darken. The strokes become shakier. The figures behind her blur. Gustave slows as they approach a massive mural at the corridor's center, a mural that spans from floor to ceiling. It begins with the paintress standing before a crowd, her brush raised. But as the eye travels across the wall, her posture shifts. Her shoulders slope. Her grip loosens. The people behind her fade, some gradually, some suddenly, until the final section of the mural shows her standing alone in a landscape of muted grays. Her brush is lifted, but her smile is gone. Lune touches the mural, sensing the magic woven into the paint. These walls, they show her transition, the moment her resolve began to collapse into necessity. Gustave steps closer to the last panel, reading the faint inscription etched beneath it. When the world grows heavy, lighten it, even at the cost of memory. Maelle whispers, she believed she was helping them, easing their suffering. But she was easing her own too, Sciel adds. Every erasure lessened her pain, for a moment. They continue, and the corridor grows narrower. The murals shift again, no longer scenes of resolve, but mathematical diagrams, swirling symbols, and notes written in soft, looping script. These are formulas, calculations of balance, pain, longevity, and stability. The first Gommage. The calculations are incomplete, filled with crossed-out lines and rewritten symbols. The paintress had searched for ways to slow the cycle, to lessen the burden, to find a method that would prevent her own emotions from destroying the world. But every mural here ends with the same faint, repeated symbol, a descending number, a quiet resignation. Sciel pauses at a mural showing an early attempt at the Gommage. The age is high, 72. The paint strokes are gentle, hesitant. The mural beside it shows another number, 64, then 51, then 43. Each one painted with more desperation, less control, the strokes increasingly unstable. This is where she realized she couldn't stop it, Lune says. She could only shape it. Gustave clenches his jaw. Then she began choosing ages, to release the built-up grief, before it tore the world apart. They walk further until the corridor ends at a tall archway carved with swirling pigments. The symbols above the arch match those on the earliest Gommage calculations. The pastel creature glides ahead and lands gently at the arch's base. Its glow brightens. This is it, Lune whispers. The doorway to the heart of her decision, and the path that leads toward her sanctuary. Gustave steps beneath the arch, a quiet resolve forming deep within him. He understands the paintress now, not as a distant destroyer, but as a person who carried more sorrow than anyone could endure. And yet, the cycle must end. The murals fade behind them as they cross into the next space, into the chamber where the first Gommage was truly born, and where the expedition must face the truth of what stopping it will cost. The archway opens into silence, not the peaceful kind they've felt before, but a vast, suspended stillness, like the world here is holding its breath, waiting for the moment someone finally dares to speak its truth. The chamber beyond is circular and tall, its ceiling disappearing into darkness. Columns rise around the perimeter, each one carved with flowing strokes that resemble cascading ribbons of paint. The floor is smooth, reflective, like a polished mirror of muted colors. And at the center stands a pedestal. Upon it rests a delicate object, a brush. Not broken, not abandoned, but placed gently, as if in reverence. The pastel creature drifts forward, hovering above the brush, its glow softening into something like mourning. Gustave steps closer, but stops a few feet away, sensing the weight around the pedestal. "This is where she stood," he says quietly, "when she made the decision." Lune closes her eyes, letting the chamber's magic wash through her senses. "This room remembers everything, not through visions, but through the emotions soaked into the stone." The floor shifts. Slowly, faint colors spill outward from the pedestal, rippling across the chamber until they form blurred shapes. No single image, no clear figures, but impressions. Feelings. Fear trembling in the strokes. Hope flickering like a candle refusing to die. Desperation winding through the pigments in jagged sweeps. Resolve settling like weighted light. Maelle feels her breath hitch. She didn't want to erase anyone. Sciel nods slowly. But she was terrified of what would happen if she didn't. The colors deepen. The impressions rearrange themselves, now sharper, now more focused. A crowd trembling with pain after the fracture. People fading not because of magic, but because their grief was too heavy to bear. The Paintress watching helplessly as lives crumbled around her. Her hands shaking, her brush trembling, her heart shattering again and again with every scream, every collapse, every face she couldn't save. Then, a different shape forms, a number descending, a cycle repeating. The first Gommage, not an act of power, but of mercy twisted by despair. Lune whispers, "She lowered the number because the grief inside her grew faster than the world could carry." Gustave stares at the rippling colors, and every year it grew stronger. The floor shifts again, creating a swirling image, like storm clouds rolling across a painted sky. Lives erased, memories scattered, sorrow reset, peace restored, temporarily. Then the sorrow returned, heavier than before. The Paintress kneels in the image, clutching her brush as though it weighs 1,000 pounds. She raises it with trembling hands. Each stroke she paints is slower, heavier, more desperate. A number appears. 33. Gustave feels his stomach tighten. He hears Sophie's laughter in the back of his mind, faint, fading. Lune steps beside him, her voice gentle. She wasn't choosing who to erase, Gustave. She was choosing what the world and her own heart could survive. Maelle touches the brush's pedestal. The stone vibrates softly, responding to her presence. The gommage isn't cruelty. It's her breaking, over and over again. Sciel's hand tightens on his weapon, but his expression remains solemn. And she never found a way to stop it. The chamber shifts once more. This time, the colors form a doorway at the far end, one shaped like interlocking brushstrokes, each glowing faintly. Lune studies it. This leads to her sanctum. Gustave steps toward the doorway. The air trembles around him, carrying both warmth and weight. The pastel creature hovers close, its glow steady. "We're close," Gustave says softly. "Closer than anyone has ever been." Maelle nods, her eyes shining with determination. "And we're not turning back." Sciel exhales, grounding himself. "Whatever we find in there, we face it together." Lune lifts her hand, her magic swirling in delicate light. This is the moment her story begins to meet ours. The brush on the pedestal glows faintly, just once, like a heartbeat. Then the doorway fully forms, opening into a corridor filled with soft, drifting pigments. This corridor leads to the Paintress herself, to the heart of her sorrow, her creation, her power, and her breaking. The corridor beyond the chamber of the first Gommage is unlike any space the expedition has passed through. It is quiet, so quiet that even their footsteps seem softened, swallowed by the drifting pigments that float like dust in sunbeams. The walls curve inward, then outward, as though shaped by the rhythm of breathing. The air tastes faintly of paint and something sweeter, like the echo of a memory that refuses to fade. As they walk deeper, the pigments shift color in soft waves, calm tones, gentle blues, tender pinks, colors that feel like lullabies painted onto the air. "She wanted this place to be peaceful," Maelle whispers. Lune nods. For herself, or for the memories of those she lost. The corridor widens, and the drifting pigments begin to gather overhead, forming streams that glide like ribbons caught in unseen currents. These ribbons twist and overlap, creating flowing patterns that resemble brushstrokes dancing in slow motion. The pastel creature follows these arcs as though returning to someplace familiar. The corridor opens at last into a breathtaking space, a sanctuary. Circular, vast, reverent. The ceiling is high and domed, filled with swirling pigments that move like clouds painted by a gentle hand. The walls are covered in murals, scenes from her life that have not faded, scenes she preserved even when time consumed everything else. A bustling village, a celebration beneath lanterns, laughter dancing through the streets, hands interlocked, faces glowing with joy. Scenes of love, scenes before the fracture, scenes she could not bear to lose. At the far end of the chambers stands a raised platform, a simple chair, a table with scattered pigments, a small bowl of clear water, and countless unfinished paintings resting against the walls. Sketches, attempts, moments that halted mid-stroke. As they step inside, the air ripples, not violently, gently, like a sigh. And a figure appears, not fully solid, formed of pigments in soft light, but unmistakably shaped like a woman, with gentle posture and a brush held loosely in her hand. Her presence is calm, not imposing. The paintress faces them with eyes that shimmer in slow ripples of color, like light reflecting across water at dusk. The pastel creature flutters toward her, circling her silhouette. She raises a faint hand, as if to acknowledge it, and for a moment her form brightens. Gustave steps forward, his voice steady, but soft enough not to break the reverence of the room. "We're not here to fight you." Her head tilts. The pigments around her shimmer, forming faint waves of emotion, hesitation, sorrow, curiosity. Lune steps beside Gustave. "We've seen your memories. We've seen the fracture, the garden, the hall of names. We know why the Gommage began. The paintress's form sways gently, as if absorbing their words. Maelle steps forward slowly. You didn't want to erase us, any of us. You were trying to ease pain you couldn't bear alone. The pigments around the paintress tremble. Her form flickers, bright, then dim. She raises her brush, but not as a weapon, as a woman exhausted. Images swirl in the air behind her. Her with the blurred figure she loved. Her holding children's hands as she painted gardens. Her collapsing in the valley. Her crafting the first gommage with trembling fingers. Her trying, again and again, to spare the world from the overflow of her grief. Each memory forms and dissolves like petals carried off by wind. I understand, Gustave says. His voice breaks slightly. I lost someone too. The pigments near the paintress slow, listening. Sciel steps forward. Your sorrow became the world's burden, but it was never meant to be yours alone. Lune lifts her hand, releasing small sparks of magic that hover in the air like fireflies. Let us help carry some of it. The paintress's form stills. Then, slowly, she lowers her brush. The pigments in the room deepen in tone, swirling faster overhead until they form a cyclone of shifting colors. The ground trembles softly. A pulse spreads outward like a heartbeat. Her voice finally emerges. It is not loud, not sharp. Soft, frayed, almost breaking. A whisper carried by pigment. I wanted to stop. The words ripple through the chamber, vibrating in the air. I tried. Her form flickers again, more violently now. Colors clash, light and dark, hope and despair, creation and erasure. The pigments behind her swirl into the shape of the fractured world. Villages fading, people disappearing, memories slipping away like wet paint carried down a drain. But I cannot unmake what I have shaped. She extends her hand, trembling, toward the ceiling, and the pigments above twist into a spiraling storm. The sanctuary's calm breaks. The paintress's grief, contained for so long, erupts into swirling turbulence, pulling colors from the walls, the floor, even the air they breathe. Her form shatters into fragments of pigment and reforms, struggling against the weight of her own magic. Gustave braces himself, feeling the pressure build. Lune's voice struggles to remain steady. She's losing control. Here, even in her sanctuary. Maelle steps forward, eyes wide with both determination and compassion. We have to help her, before the storm consumes her. Sciel grips his weapons, though not with intent to harm. Then we face this storm, and free her from it. The paintress lifts her brush, now glowing like a burning comet of sorrow and memory. The sanctuary begins to shake. Murals tear into drifting shreds of color. Unfinished paintings spiral into the storm. Her eyes, those shimmering pools of broken emotion, lock onto the expedition. Not with hatred, not even with fear, but with pleading, because she cannot stop the storm alone. The pigments roar. The chamber contracts. Her grief takes shape. A colossal figure rises from the swirling storm, emerging like a titan of paint, writhing, shifting, growing. The embodiment of every emotion she could not bear. Her last guardian. Her greatest wound. It turns toward them, and the sanctuary fills with trembling light. The sanctuary shudders as the colossal storm creature fully takes shape. Its body a spiraling mass of colors, each shade thrashing like a trapped emotion, desperate to be seen. Limbs form and dissolve, Faces appear and vanish, and the air around it thickens with raw, unfiltered feeling. The creature towers over the chamber, its shape scraping the painted clouds overhead, distorting the murals of the past. It is not a monster. It is her pain, given form large enough to crush the world. The paintress collapses to her knees beneath it, her brush flickering in her trembling hand. Her form shimmers with instability, fading, reforming, her strength unraveling thread by thread. She reaches upward toward the creature, but her hand passes through it as though touching smoke. Gustave steps forward, planting his feet firmly as the ground trembles beneath him. She's not controlling it anymore. Lune closes her eyes, feeling the emotional turbulence pulsing through the chamber like waves. This is everything she held inside, every grief she never let herself feel. It's overflowing. Maelle steadies her stance, voice soft but resolute. Then we help her release it. Sciel twirls his weapons once, not in aggression, but in preparation, like someone preparing to steady a falling tower. We don't fight it to destroy it. We fight it to ease its burden. The storm creature moves first. A massive arm made of swirling pigments sweeps downward, spilling colors across the floor like a crashing tide. Gustave intercepts the blow with his mechanical arm, the impact sending a shockwave through the chamber, cracking the paint along the nearest mural. Maelle darts forward, her movements sharp and deliberate, slicing through tendrils of scrambling emotion, each cut releasing bursts of color that drift like freed birds. Sciel moves beside her, striking not at the creature's mass, but at the unstable points where emotions knot together. Lune raises her hands, weaving delicate sigils that glow with calming light. Each sigil she releases wraps around a fragment of the creature, temporarily stabilizing its chaotic form, keeping it from collapsing or exploding outward. The creature roars, not a sound of anger, but a sound of desperate sorrow. The cry of someone who carried the world alone for too long. The paintress tries to rise, but her form weakens again and she collapses. Her voice trembles into the air, faint as dust. I didn't want this. Gustave glances at her through the chaos. We know. The creature lashes out again, this time sending a wave of dark pigment that crashes across the sanctuary like a storm tide. The color spreads across the floor, creeping toward the murals, threatening to swallow the last memories she preserved. Lune reacts instantly, casting shields of golden light that break the tide into droplets. They fall harmlessly, staining the floor in harmless flecks. Sciel leaps toward the creature's core, its brightest, most turbulent center. He strikes the swirling mass, breaking apart the densest cluster of emotions. Colors scatter into the air. Maelle follows through, slicing away another cluster, turning a scream of rage into a ripple of gentle blue that drifts away like a dissolving memory. Piece by piece, the creature weakens. But then it shifts into a new form, taller, broader, trembling violently. This time, its shape resembles the blurred figure from the paintress's memories, a silhouette of someone she loved, someone she lost, someone she could never let go of. The creature raises its hand, but instead of attacking, it reaches toward her. The paintress's form flinches. Her voice cracks, barely audible. Don't make me watch again. The storm creature trembles, torn between its need to reach for her and its instability tearing at its form. The pigments swirl faster, streaking the air with anguished motion. Lune's breath catches. It's her memory of them. She locked it away, and now it's breaking free. Gustave steps forward, shouting above the storm. Let us help you! The paintress looks up at him, colors streaming from her eyes like tears. "I can't. I'm not strong enough." Gustave shakes his head, voice steady. "You were never meant to do this alone." For the first time, her form steadies. The storm creature wavers. The pastel creature suddenly darts upward, glowing brighter than ever before. It presses itself into the creature's core, into the center of grief. The creature's swirling mass freezes, then begins to shrink, condensing its chaotic expanse into a smaller, trembling form. Lune seizes the moment. "Everyone, now! Help it release! Don't fight! Guide!" Gustave braces the creature's collapsing arm. Maelle cuts away dark clusters of pain. Sciel steadies the form from behind. Lune calms the trembling pigments at the center. Bit by bit, the storm folds inward, like a final exhale. And then, the creature collapses, gently, like a cloud falling asleep. It dissolves into soft motes that drift through the sanctuary, painting the air with quiet light. The Paintress gasps, her form stabilizing as the storm fades. She stands slowly, trembling, her brush glowing faintly with warmth instead of anguish. The pastel creature, now dimming, drifts down into her hands. She holds it like something precious. Gustave approaches. "Your pain isn't gone," he says softly, "but it's no longer tearing the world apart." Her shimmering eyes meet his. "Then help me end the cycle." The words settle into the chamber like a prayer. Soft, final, hopeful. The sanctuary grows still, awaiting the last steps toward ending the Gommage forever. The storm of her grief settles into quiet motes of color drifting through the sanctuary, falling like gentle snow. The Paintress stands at the center of the fading light, her form no longer flickering, no longer trembling as though torn between breaking and holding on. She feels lighter. Fragile, yes, but not collapsing beneath the weight of her sorrow. The pastel creature, barely glowing now, rests in her hands like a final memory she's finally ready to let breathe. Silence settles across the sanctuary. Not the heavy silence of despair, but the soft, waiting silence of understanding. Gustave steps toward her slowly, his posture steady, his voice warm enough not to disturb the peace around them. "You said you want to end the cycle. Tell us how." The Paintress lifts her gaze. Her shimmering eyes reflect all the colors of the sanctuary: golden hope, violet grief, soft blue longing. When she speaks, her voice is almost a sigh carried by pigment. "The Gommage was meant to protect the world from me, from what I could not bear." Lune nods softly, already understanding. "Your heart became too powerful. Your emotions shaped reality." The Paintress lowers the pastel creature into a shallow bowl on the table. It dims, settling like a candle at the end of its flame. "Every year," she whispers, "the grief returned stronger, and I grew weaker. My brush followed the sorrow instead of the joy." Maelle steps closer. "But we weakened the storm. You're not alone now." The Paintress's fingers tighten around the brush she's held for countless years. The tool that built gardens, the tool that healed villages, the tool that erased millions. She turns the brush in her hand, slowly, reverently. "To end the Gommage," she says, "I must let go of this." The brush glows, its light flickering between promise and fear. Sciel speaks gently. "Letting go means giving up your power." Her silence answers him. The murals around them shift faintly, as if holding their breath. Memories ripple along the sanctuary walls, moments of laughter, of creation, of deep love. Moments that held her world together long before sorrow came. Lune steps closer, her voice glowing with empathy. You don't lose what you are. You only lose what hurt you. The Paintress's form flickers, not from instability, but from overwhelming emotion. She looks at Gustave. This world, can it truly survive if I stop carrying it? Gustave thinks of Sophie, of her laughter, of her warmth, of the ache he carried alone until now. He nods. People can bear grief together. Your burden won't become ours. It already is ours. The Paintress exhales, for the first time not in pain, but in release. She steps toward the pedestal at the center of the sanctuary. Her brush glows brighter, stronger. Not with grief, but with the memory of everything she once created with love. The pigments in the room rise, swirling softly around her in warm colors, sunlit golds, gentle pinks, shy greens peeking through. She lifts the brush. The sanctuary trembles, not with fear, but with anticipation. Then let this be my final stroke. She presses the brush to the air and draws a single line. It ripples outward like a wave through water, spreading across the sanctuary, dissolving the remaining storm motes, calming the murals, soothing the trembling pigments embedded in the walls. The line grows brighter, brighter, until it bursts into soft white light. A warmth fills the chamber. Not overwhelming, not frightening. A warmth like the embrace of someone returning home after years away. The brush dims in her hand. Her power softens. Her form stabilizes. Her grief finally unclenches. The Paintress lowers her arm. It is done. The Gommage's cycle breaks, quietly, gently, without fanfare. The pastel creature flickers once, glowing softly, its final spark, before dissolving into drifting dust that joins the sanctuary's warm light. Maelle watches it drift upward. It wasn't a creature. It was a fragment of her heart. Lune smiles tenderly. And it chose peace. The Paintress turns toward them, now faint but free. Come, she whispers. There is one last thing you must see. She gestures toward a small archway forming at the sanctuary's edge. One not made of paint or stone, but of soft, rising color. Gustave looks back at the others. Their expressions are tired, yes. Changed, absolutely. But ready. They follow her together, stepping toward the final truth that awaits them beyond the sanctuary. The archway of soft color opens into a serene expanse unlike anything the expedition has seen. It is neither cavern nor corridor, neither sanctuary nor ruin. It feels like a place between worlds, painted from air and memory. The ground beneath their feet is warm, brushed in gentle hues that shimmer like early morning light. Above them, the sky is a soft gradient of pastels, as though the sun is rising for the very first time. The Paintress steps forward, her form fainter now, no longer tethered by overwhelming grief or crushing power. She moves lightly, almost peacefully, as though the weight she carried for decades has finally lifted, and she is learning how to walk without it. This place, Lune whispers, eyes wide. It's a new canvas. The Paintress nods softly. A space untouched by sorrow. One I could never enter until you helped me let go. Gustave looks around. The air feels alive, not with turmoil, but with possibility. Hints of shapes form around them. Outlines of trees not yet filled in. gentle ripples that might someday become rivers, patches of sky waiting for their stars. It is not finished, and that is what makes it beautiful. Sciel exhales slowly. The world above. Will it change now? Yes, the Paintress says. Her voice is quiet but steady. Without the Gommage, the land will heal. Memories will no longer fade at my touch. Ages will not be taken. Creation will grow again. Maelle's voice trembles with hope. People will live full lives? The Paintress smiles, a fragile human smile. And they will remember them. Gustave steps closer. And you? I will remain here, she says gently. What I once was, the Paintress of the Gommage, no longer exists. My power is quiet now. I will watch as the world heals, but I will not shape it again. The murals of her life begin to appear faintly across the pastel horizon. Scenes of her village, her love, her joy, her breaking and her surrender. They fade softly, leaving behind only calm color, as if the world itself is releasing the burden alongside her. She looks at the expedition, at each of them. At first, I feared you would come to punish me, she whispers. Then I feared you would fail. But you came to understand, and in doing so, you saved me. Lune bows her head gently. You saved yourself. We only helped you see where to begin. The Paintress steps toward Gustave last. In her eyes, he sees both the sorrow of what she took from the world and the gratitude for what he helped her restore. You carry your own grief, she says softly, and yet you walked through mine. Gustave's breath steadies. Sophie, will people like her be remembered now? Her answer is a gentle nod. She already is. The pastel landscape brightens, as though affirming her words. A soft wind begins to rise. Not a storm, not a tremor, but a peaceful breeze that lifts drifting flecks of color into the air. The Paintress steps back as her form grows more translucent, her outline dissolving softly into the new world she created. You showed me that sorrow can be shared, she says, and in sharing it, it can finally rest. Her voice fades, becoming part of the wind. Go, live, let your world grow again. The last of her color drifts upward and dissolves into the gentle sky. Silence follows, calm, pure, peaceful. Gustave closes his eyes. Maelle gently wipes a tear from her cheek. Sciel rests his weapons with quiet respect. Lune inhales, letting the new world's air fill her lungs with promise. Then, in the distance, they see it. A doorway back to the mainland. It shimmers softly, not painted by sorrow, but by dawn. They walk toward it together. As they cross through the threshold, the pastel world fades behind them, and the familiar landscape of the mainland reappears. But different. Lighter, more alive. The sky overhead is clearer. Colors in the grass are brighter. And somewhere, faint but unmistakable, they hear the laughter of families whose futures were once limited, now stretching open again, unbroken. Gustave breathes in the new air. The cycle is over. The world will heal. And Sophie's memory, everyone's memory, will remain. The four of them walk toward the horizon, the first explorers of a world reborn. And the story of Expedition 33 ends not in sorrow, but in dawn. And that was the quiet tale of Expedition 33, a journey from grief into dawn. If this story helped you rest, You can gently like the video and subscribe for more peaceful adventures. For now, breathe softly and drift into sleep. Good night.